Unfortunately, one of the things we often see in a potential crisis, because the phones are ringing and social media is going viral and regulators are demanding answers and all that's going on, becomes very distracting. So where great leadership in a crisis context comes in is the ability to make sure everybody's focused on what's really important. And what's really important is the long-term interests of the business.
The truth of the matter is that the fundamental characteristics of a crisis is it is a rare event. It is possibly a once in a lifetime or once in a career situation. And if we accept that there is nothing in this world that we do correctly the first time, I think it's unreasonable to expect that people will respond effectively to a crisis situation if it is the first time that they are in it.
In terms of my response consultants, I will be drawing them from people who in their other lives, in previous careers, have been people who've dealt with crisis all the time. Soldiers, diplomats, even journalists are good material for that kind of thing, because they are people who go into crisis situations all the time and it becomes a natural thing to them.
Leadership, full stop, is really important in incident crisis management. I guess what I would consider really, really important is that organisational leaders understand their role in a crisis. They also understand and have a bit of self-awareness about their own behaviours. We all have our tendencies, our natural behaviours, and when we're put under stress, when we're put into a pressure situation, we respond differently, and it's important to understand and have that level of self-awareness as to how you could impact and affect other people.
What happens as part of your brain starts initiating that fight or flight reaction. So actually it becomes a really difficult thing to be an effective leader. I think there are lots of different types of leadership styles that will work during a crisis, and I think what will make a really effective leader is to understand what type of leadership style to adopt in the situation that you're presented with. So for example, where you have subject matter experts, that you give everybody the opportunity to be involved in the conversation. So you then need to create space for everybody to be able to have their input. Then that's the kind of style that you have to adopt. However, if it's getting to a point where nobody's making decisions because people are just sitting around for too long and people are deliberating too much, then you might need to be a bit more directive in your leadership style.
People are at the heart of an effective crisis management response, and for us, ahead of any exercise, we want to try and make sure that we've equipped people well with the right knowledge and skills to be able to deliver their role. And not everyone's suited to the roles that they've been given in the plan. Our exercises are designed in a way that tries to stress test the kind of realistic expectations and demands on the individual to try and then work out what role best suits them.
So one of the really interesting things about working with the emergency services is they're actually made up of a team of teams. So it's not just one team working together with one leader, it's actually a group of different teams, so police, fire and ambulance, or strategic, operational and tactical command. And one of the things that's important in these distributed team networks is not necessarily having a strong leader, but having a clear understanding of roles and responsibilities across the network as a whole. In an interview study that we conducted, we identified that team uncertainty was massively influenced by a poor understanding of roles and responsibilities. This could be to do with miscommunication, so people were provided with information that wasn't relevant or didn't receive the information, and importantly, when decisions were made but weren't actually translated into operations on the ground, which can obviously have severe, potentially catastrophic consequences.
I think by default, people's positions put them in a crisis management team. I have seen people step out of a crisis management team, and I think it's a really, really brave thing to do. And I think it's entirely the right thing to do if you're not comfortable in that situation, if you're in any particular situation, if you're becoming emotionally attached to it. And not many people would consider themselves, looking at the situation and saying, am I the best person to deal with this? I think natural instinct and positions in organisations mean that you want to get involved.
Leadership in a crisis, particularly in a crisis, is critical, because a crisis is a bet the company point for most companies. So what you want to do is make sure that when you bring people together, that ultimately you can develop a strategy that's going to make sense from the long-term interests of the business. So making sure that you can get everyone on the same page when it comes to that response strategy becomes really, really important. Leadership
in incident crisis response is very much about delegation and trust, and that's why, as we'll talk about, it's important to practice, to rehearse, and to understand all those people within your team, that they understand their roles. The leader is there to set a strategy. If you don't have the ability to set that strategy and kind of stay out of, we might refer to stay out of the weeds, and not get sucked into the daily tasks, then you won't maintain that strategic position, that overview of everything that's going on, and really trusting, and I think if a lot of people are honest with themselves, how much do they trust other departments, other managers to go away, complete a task and come back. A lot of organisations I've seen, that's where the leadership system fails, and we don't trust people, and we don't engender that trust in people either, so people are always deferring. Just be aware, when we're dealing with an incident or a crisis, there's a lot of additional work being piled onto people, and there is also a tendency that we start generating even more work by demanding summaries and updates and briefing notes, which might all be necessary and will help and assist that process, but just be mindful that just compiling on more and more pressure, if we've got good governance procedures in place, we should be able to see most of that anyway in those summaries.
I remember one of my response consultants going into a CMT that had 26 people in it. They had generated somewhere in the region of about 3,000 emails in the 3 days leading up to him actually arriving on the scene. And yet there'd been no new information from the situation at all in that time. But they'd managed to generate all this heat and noise. And so what he did was he cut it down. He said, I want 4 of these people, the other 22 guys gone, and shut down all of this speculation that's going on in the emails and cut that down. The first CMT meeting in that particular situation that I dealt with, which I was on remotely, lasted 4 hours. I got the next one down to 40 minutes. He cut it down to 15.
One of the benefits of using simulations is that we can try to train these different individuals to understand their different roles and responsibilities. We could potentially do this virtually, so we don't have to co-locate people together to learn about people's roles and responsibilities. And we can also maximise training output, so it's not just a case of having one individual turning up or a couple of individuals turning up at a live exercise. We can actually run this exercise multiple times across different players. So this can be really beneficial for helping us to understand and grow and train an understanding of the different roles and responsibilities within a multi-team system.
The question is not what do we need to do, but what sort of organisation do we need to be? If an organisation is based around bureaucratic protocols, process-driven management, hierarchical controls, it is unlikely that you'll be able to make the transition effectively to a crisis situation where those bureaucratic management systems are just not appropriate or effective.